recording.
Great. All right. So good evening, everybody. This is our, February planning and zoning meeting, last day of February. Very hard to believe we're here almost in March. As most of you probably had seen, the applicant for tonight, Fannie Mae, has decided to, postpone their presentation before us tonight. I reached out to them several times. I talked to them by phone, and they still thought they were a go around 2 o'clock. And then I guess after our conversation, they talked to their client, and they decided it was in their best interest to not come before us tonight. But I thought it would be a good idea for us to get together, even if it's without the applicant, and just talk through some issues, maybe specific to that application, because I think some of the things we're seeing on that application do carry over to some other applications as well. And maybe, we could have a good dialogue about certain things and, where some of the priorities lie and so on. But and then I wanted to give an update on some of the future applications that we're starting to get word of. Let me start off by, Michelle and I did not, coordinate today about meeting minutes from the last meeting. And so I'm assuming we'll send those out independently, and then we'll kind of regroup with meeting minute review and approval at our March meeting. Is that probably fair, Michelle?
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks, Rob.
Okay, great. Thanks. So let me quickly jump down to the future applications. There's actually 3 projects now that I'm aware of that are going to be coming before us in the coming months. The first one is being referred to as the Lofts 2 at Reston Station. It's actually, I think, I believe it's being put together by Pulte, and I think the landowner is Meridian. It's the tract of land on Sunset Hills Road. It's across the street from the post office, but just west of that location along Sunset Hills. And there's a couple 1-story low-rise buildings there today. And that area in between Sunset Hills and the toll road is under development right now. And so this is some of those 1-story existing offices that are now being proposed for residential by that application. So that application will be coming before us in March at our March meeting. That's going to be the first time we'll have seen that. And then
Rob, can I ask a question on that? This is Tammy.
Yeah. Yes.
Is it on the south side of Sunset?
Yes.
And are they going to repurpose existing buildings or tear down and rebuild?
It's a tear down and rebuild.
Thank you.
Yes. My understanding, they have filed with the county, and they have sent me a copy of their application. And I, was quizzing them as to when they were going to put the package together and get it out to everybody. And I haven't heard back yet on that. But our March meeting, I believe, I forget the exact date, but that'll be forthcoming. And then I was approached by the application of the attorney for Comstock at the Commerce Center, and they are proposing a zoning amendment to do some reconfiguration of some of their development at the south side of the toll road and west of Wheelie Avenue. And so some of us, that were a part of that pedestrian crossing subcommittee, we wondered if there was going to be changes to that Commerce Center zoning plan, and apparently there will be. Now, they have not determined a date when they feel that they're going to be ready to come before us on planning and zoning, but I kind of put it down as a TBD. And then the last application I'm aware of that I was called, I got a phone call today from the Reston Heights attorney. Apparently they have a PRC plan that they have to bring before us based on some changes that they would like to make at Reston Heights. And for those of you who, just to remind everybody, a PRC plan is not a zoning plan, but it's kind of like a preliminary site plan for the PRC zone. The applicants are required to come before us with kind of like it's almost like a preliminary site plan before they go on and get their approvals at the county. And we haven't seen a PRC plan in quite a while that I recall. And they would like to come before us in April is the tentative date for that. All right. Any questions on that? I don't know a lot about a lot of the details. I do have a Commerce Center plan I was sent as well. And if I get the feeling that those applicants are not going to be sending something out in the near term, then we'll figure out a way to put that somewhere where people can access it on the committee if they'd like to see it. The problem is the drawing sizes are huge. They're just pretty large. What I could do is send out just like the plan view, maybe only as a first starter to get people aware of at least what some of those are about.
Hey,
Hey,
Rob, on Comstock's Commerce Center, I think that they have like at least a Dropbox link that could be sent around, and then their
Okay.
plans have already hit on the Plus system, so those links can be shared too.
That's a good point. Yep.
Quick question on Reston Heights. Do you know if it's gone before the DRB already, or are we in between DRB stage?
I know they were aware that they have to go before DRB. I really don't know where they are in the process. This goes back a while where they had filed a plan and then received a bunch of comments and it just got put on hold, and it's been years since they've resurrected it, I guess. So I don't know much more about that one. Okay, so I guess my goal tonight was we all received quite a bit of correspondence over the last week's time period about the Fannie Mae application. So I still thought it would be a good idea to get together tonight. I didn't think I felt the committee probably wanted to at least have a discussion based on some of the correspondence that has come about. And so just as a quick summary, we did receive a letter in support of the application from, let's see, Maggie Parker, who's representing the chair of Public Art Reston. And primarily, she was just promoting the fact that there's art already at the open space within the Fannie Mae property, and they were looking forward to the opportunity for that to be truly publicly accessible and kind of be retained. I think they were in support of that concept. Then we received, I think there's a separate email from Reston Citizens Association that highlighted a lot of the things that were in the county staff report. We received the county staff report that stipulated a couple reasons for their denial. And then Reston Association then also issued some correspondence that basically outlined and addressed that to P&Z for our consideration to not approve the plan until some of these issues get resolved. And many of those issues were, again, the ones that were listed in the county staff report. So I think I captured everything. And then there's certainly been some correspondence from the neighboring property owners. The North Shore cluster had sent out some information. I think there was a lot of confusion over the public accessibility of the open space as it exists today. And I think the result or the reasoning for that confusion, it turned out where, if I understood it correctly, the 1993 rezoning for the Fannie Mae, that was then Sallie Mae property, had a statement of justification that seemed to clearly indicate that there was an intent for the open space to be there for not only the whoever owned the property, but also for the neighboring residents as well. But for some reason, that did not get carried over in the final proffer language that was done in 1993. And so I think that kind of shed some light as to why some of the neighbors were so adamant that they had public access for so long. Because I think some of them who were around back then probably just remembered hearing that that's what was the intent, and it just never got memorialized. And that's kind of my understanding for some of the correspondence I've seen from the North Shore cluster. They were very good at having some documents that dated back a ways to help decipher that. So, I don't know where to take it from here. I guess I wanted to just try to run down just a quick list of things that I know were outstanding, that some of these were items that our committee brought to the applicant's attention, we're concerned about. And then others were a little bit new to me that I saw in the county staff report. And then in talking with the applicant today, I did learn that they do feel that they have positive responses to a lot of the things that they have seen in the county staff report, and further commitments to the neighboring residents, which I thought was a good sign. They just didn't have it all together for tonight, and plus they certainly have to figure out how to get back to the county and get a more favorable read from the county or ruling from the county before they move on to the planning commission. As of this afternoon, they had not changed their planning commission date, which I believe is on the 9th. So the March 9th. So I do anticipate that they're going to have to change that. I can't imagine that they can move forward at all with where they are today. So
Rob, may I ask?
Yes.
So if they were going to go for the 9th, that would be before our next meeting. So
absolutely. Yeah.
And did they explain that their intention was not to come back?
No, I mean, again, when I spoke to them around 2:00, their intention was to come to us tonight. And if tonight wasn't going to be even a vote, they felt that they then would then come back for a vote at another evening. So I just think this, this information was traveling a bit fast, and they just hadn't made all their decisions that turned into, revised dates or cancellation of the planning commission.
Rob, this is Mike. The email from Michael Van Atta from this afternoon actually said he looks forward to the meeting on March 21st.
To come back to us, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That is correct. But I think Michelle is still questioning. Yeah. I just think they didn't get around yet to changing the planning commission date, which they'll have to do.
And Rob, this is Jose from the Hunter Mill Supervisor's Office. I'd be happy to check in with the clerk to the planning commission on the PC date and share that with the committee.
Okay, great.
Because not to be, I think we have to take them at their word in the email, but it would be unfortunate if we didn't vote on it and they went to the planning commission without our vote.
I don't think that's going to happen. I think that Rob was just pointing out that they have to make a change and he doesn't know what, so that means he doesn't know when it's changed, will be changed too. They're not going to skip Reston planning and zoning.
And
I hope
Lynn,
not. Yeah.
Lynn
They
threw in the
won't.
chat, Michelle, that it looks like the applicant's working on changing the date for the planning commission. So she probably is more aware of the changes than we are.
Yeah, again, things are moving quite fast here on this, so it just has to settle down here. But so let me just maybe a quick little summary of some of the major issues that have been raised during, again, a lot of the dialogue that's gone back from a number of different groups. You know, it was noted that the plan, you know, has improvements in what's called the environmental quality corridor. And I want to maybe come back to that later to make sure everybody understands what an environmental quality corridor even is. But um, so there was some concern raised about just what improvements were being proposed inside the environmental quality corridor. There were some concerns raised over the fact that American Dream Way, you know, was in the grid of streets and in the Reston standards. You know, a lot of our streets are meant to be public and fully accessible, and the fact that American Dream Way was, you know, had some security on it that was going to limit the ability to use it freely by all. And then I think there was some perpendicular parking to it as opposed to parallel parking was highlighted as some things that just don't go along with the roadway standards that have been adopted. You know, creating more public access throughout the site, including more public pathway connections, not only to the ponds, but kind of through the site and to the Plaza America, you know, has been an ongoing topic. Let's see. There was mention about trying to provide more water quality measures that are non-structural. I'm kind of reading from the Reston Association list here at the moment. And then, of course, there was some concern raised about RA membership that this committee had brought up, and just seeing a stronger commitment to at least have that dialogue and that discussion, which I do believe that applicant has. They're ready to agree to that. So, and then obviously the connectivity to the North Shore cluster and the concerns they had about where some of that access was. I think the applicant's revised plans were starting to show how they were trying to improve that that access, and I think that was, you know, one of the key points that they were going to try to present tonight. So I'd like to open it up here to kind of see where we want to take the dialogue, if we want to talk about things as a big picture, or dive right into some of the details on this application. You know, if we had some serious concerns about, you know, where things were heading and where, you know, where we anticipate them going. I heard from the applicant today, they felt that many of the county staff issues, they felt they were able to resolve. The only thing I did not hear from them today was I didn't hear any reduction in density, any reduction of units. And that was one of the comments. Tammy, let's start with you.
Thank you. I mean, it's a beautiful site, and I read somewhere that we had heard their price point was 800,000. Then I read somewhere that it was between $1 million and $1.4 million. Well, these units are narrow. There's some of them that I think are 24, but they've got 18s in there. Seriously, $1 million for an 18-foot wide unit? That's insane. The density is way too high for that site. And there are so many problems. I think with the EQC, they poo-poo their minor floodplain. Folks, there is no such thing as a minor floodplain. The operative word is floodplain. We're not getting lighter precipitation. We're getting horrendous storms. So that's of huge concern. they have paths going everywhere. I don't understand how they're promoting a natural environment when they have paths all circulating all around all three ponds. The wildlife doesn't like that. I think easily they can have public access, but do they really need figure eights around each pond? I don't think so. It's just a shame because they're trying to maximize their profit, and by just packing too many units in there. I think it's a real shame. I'm thrilled that the county called them on that. And I totally 100% agree. If they don't reduce that capacity to, I don't know, 60 units or maybe 65, but they have to show that for that kind of price range, they're giving the buyers a cluster that it can have its own cluster gathering spaces, some landscape, some places where the cluster is not open to people wandering through it all hours of the day and night. I totally am thrilled and think they did a beautiful job on 24/7, 365 opening the path between the north communities and the south along American Dream Way and the gate. I have no issue with that whatsoever. So I congratulate them on some things, but this other stuff is crazy. And they have to abide by the proffers that were made for Fannie Mae originally, which is upkeep of those ponds. So, they got to do that. Now, where are they? They're going to have a what is it called? Where the silt comes into a forebay. Are they preparing a place where they can bring a dredging, arm in there and get that silt out of that forebay, which is why the forebay is being devised? Those are questions I had, but the density is what kills it for me. I thank you.
Thanks, Tammy. But before I go on to Matt, who has his hand raised, Tammy, let me address a couple of those things. First of all, I think the majority of the trails you talk about around the ponds are existing today, and have been people have been using those for a long time, and so I think that was just the way that those ponds were originally designed. The difference I think the reason they emphasize the minor floodplain in Fairfax County, anything under 70 acres is considered minor floodplain, and it just has different rules about what you can and cannot do in those type of floodplains. I think the way it mattered was if you were in a major floodplain, these ponds that were there that were put in with the Sallie Mae development would not have been able to been put in likely in a major floodplain. And so the fact that they were in a minor floodplain, it's still a floodplain. I totally get it. 100-year still has flow through there, and it's still a drainage way. That's, I think, the one difference. The regulations allow you to do a little bit different things in a minor versus major floodplain. And yeah, the density issue, that's just something that, it's hard to speak of. I don't know about price point. I don't know. I don't have any information that tells me what, and I'm not sure that matters for me, but, density wise, whether or not, they're trying to squeeze too much in here, that's certainly an issue that's been raised by, a lot of people. So, we'll see what we want to do. But
when we were talking about this, the ponds, if I read the notes correctly, stormwater is flowing into all three. I thought originally it was only the easternmost, but according to the notes I read on this latest packet, I believe stormwater is going into all three. I think there was even a diagram to that effect. And I don't want another Tall Oaks, okay? If this is Reston, and that's a beautiful site, and it's in Old Reston, and it's just a shame that they're trying to maximize the density there at the expense of the environment. Thank you.
Understand. And again, before I go ahead on Matt, yeah, the water flows through all ponds, but I think they're just taking credit, stormwater credit for one of the ponds that meets all the criteria. Matt?
Yep, I'm here. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you for setting this up. I'm actually really glad we're having this discussion. I think that there's a benefit to talking through a couple of these things, especially in a closed group, maybe not as much in a open forum with the developer there in front of us. Because I've got a few things that I'm actually would like to push back on. I'm not in agreement with Tammy and some of the other people on this call, and I think it's good for us to have a dialogue. But really, I'm going to start with the density question, because I think that that's a big one. You know, Tammy just spoke to her position on it. Mine is actually opposite to hers. You know, looking at kind of the overall density of the corridor along the metro station, we have a situation where we've got a very high density with high rises that are up against the toll road, and they're centered around the nodes of the metro. As you pull back away from those high-rise level densities, it starts to step down, and you can see it in Reston Station, where we're dropping down to 5- and 6-story buildings, mixed-use multifamily construction. Another good example of this is what we've reviewed in the past for Isaac Newton Square, where closer to the O&D trail, there's a higher density. As we move back farther to the golf courses, it starts to step down and reduce in density down to a townhouse level density. For me, this site fits in that sort of townhouse level density strip as we make the transition from a very high density at the toll road and at the metro stations back down to the single family home neighborhoods and also the existing row house, townhouse neighborhoods. Now, just looking at the overall picture of housing in Northern Virginia, we need way more housing. I mean, we look around us and we see all this housing that's being developed. The market is so incredibly underserved by housing right now. I mean, it's a great time to be an architect. I couldn't be more busy right now. But the fact is, we're not building enough housing. We're not keeping up with the demand for housing, which is causing a huge inflation in the prices of all housing, from affordable housing all the way up to townhouses and single family homes. So this site, it is a beautiful site, and I agree with that. But I do not think that 90 townhouses on this site is excessive. I think that it's appropriate for the site. I think the sizing of these townhouses at both 18 feet or 24 feet conform to very typical layouts of row houses that I've laid out many times in my career. It's what the market wants right now, especially with the incorporation of roof decks into those townhouses. And I think that, even the townhouses over at Tall Oaks, I mean, this is what's popular in the market right now. And I don't necessarily think it should be our job on this committee to determine, what the market price is or what type of product is necessarily, what's selling on the market right now. I mean, we're here to analyze planning and zoning, but I can tell you, just because I've worked on a bunch of them, that those types of townhouses are very consistent with the types of row houses and townhouses that are being built all over Northern Virginia and are very, very popular and are selling very, very quickly right now. So for me, I agree with a lot of the comments getting into the specifics about the, pathways and improvements and public access. And I think there were certainly things that could be improved from the last time we reviewed this plan. But the density for me is not one of them. I think we need more density. I think that this site is actually a reduction in density based on what the approved use could be, because right now they could just decide we don't want to do townhomes. We're going to build another 6-story office building. And that, to me, that would be a lot more detrimental to any sort of views or density of the people that are in the adjacent neighborhoods than 3-story row homes, which are right in scale with the other row homes, around that neighborhood. So I just kind of wanted to get that out, that, there may not be a consensus on this issue. I'm interested in what everybody else thinks, but for me, this is a good site and it's an appropriate site for townhouses at this density. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Michelle has her hand up, and then David. Let's go to Michelle first and then David. So Michelle, there you go.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So first, I guess maybe if we can just take a step back, I'm a little confused. If WheelOx coming back, I don't think that we really should be discussing the specifics of this project before us now. They should need to come back and we should have that discussion with them unless we're going to have a vote on it tonight, which I don't think we're ready to do because we haven't seen their final plans. So I'm a little confused there. As far as to Matt's point on the density, I mean, the staff report was clear that the density issue was also on where they were building specifically. So, you know, I guess one question would be, I think we, looking at it again, just from that bigger perspective, we really do benefit when we have the staff report. So if we could pull back from looking at this specific applicant and instead think about, you know, what's coming down the path, you know, what's next, and talk about bigger picture items here, you know, it would be great before we voted if we could get the staff report. Is that something that's possible? Looking at this project in particular, I think we were at a great disadvantage because they came to us without actually having done any real community outreach. And I don't think we should have to ask for that, especially on a site where they know people are using it to access the metro. And they know that this is, you know, really a gatekeeper to so much of just regular life for folks, from the grocery store to the metro. We shouldn't have to demand or, you know, say, hey, you need to go talk to your neighbors first. And so, you know, those are some of the bigger things that I think would be beneficial to talk about tonight. Is what do we do when we have projects that are looking like they're going to cut off access to the metro for Reston residents? How can we ensure that, you know, that applicants are talking to neighbors prior to meeting with us, and that this is not an afterthought or we have to remind them to do that? And then is it possible that, you know, we can better schedule with them so that we're really not voting on things until we've seen the staff report? Because quite frankly, that was incredibly helpful. So that's what I've got.
Thanks, Michelle. Just real quick on that, I do think we're trying to talk about the bigger picture items here. And while I guess we're using this application tonight to kind of trigger some of that, yeah, we're not taking a vote tonight. We're not trying to be specific to necessarily drive anything until we hear back from the applicant as to how they're going to handle some of the comments that they have received. So, but I, you know, like Matt started with, you know, some of us maybe see the density in the housing shortage as this is, you know, one way to try to help solve that, and others, you know, see it differently. And getting some of those big picture items out there as a committee, I think is probably going to be healthy for us to talk through a little bit. Let's see what David or Sue has to provide.
Yeah, I just, Rob, though, if I may, I mean, being very specific, I mean, if you looked at the staff report, I mean, and I think staff is probably very much in line with build more housing, but they said you can't build it there though. And so, I mean, again, I just think that there's more to this than just a simple no density.
All right, Sue or David?
I'll start. I completely agree with Michelle that we have encouraged developers to work with neighbors, to contact affected neighbors early on in a project and to work throughout the project. And it seems that we continually have to remind developers often at the tail end of a project. So I'm not sure how to go about that, but I think that's something that, you know, in the future, we already know that there are a few developers coming before us. So perhaps early on, Rob, I don't know if there's a way that, you know, you could let them know that that's one of the high priority items of our committee. In terms of specifics on this project, I'll try to stay big. I definitely much prefer to see housing on this project than the prior proposal for office buildings. We need housing. These houses are going to be 13 feet lower than any proposed office building that would have been here. At the same time, my two concerns were density and pond quality. And on the density, I think it's very important for us to have staff reports. And this is one of the specific reasons that it's necessary. In the staff report, I learned why decreasing the density is important. I have to say with Matt, I often agree with Matt on most items, but on this particular one, I don't think we can compare this site with the density on other sites, because those sites do not have the 3 ponds. They do not have wetlands and ponds. And we need to stop just talking about this as floodplain, because units 1 to 24, as staff report pointed out, are going to be affected by wetlands. In fact, the front row of those are actually being built on wetlands. While this developer received permission from the Army Corps of Engineers for a permit that was from 2019 for 5 years, that they could do that. What it means is that wetlands that would be in Reston would be mitigated outside of Reston. I don't think any wetlands or floodplains should be mitigated outside of Reston. Often trying to reestablish wetlands doesn't work well. I don't want to see it outside of Reston and outside of Fairfax County. So I agree with staff completely on that. So in terms of the density issue, I think this area that is north and slightly east of Pond B is a very important area. And previously, when office building was proposed there, that was set aside as a large open space with trees and protecting the wetlands there. And while I realize the wetlands extends down and into the floodplain further down by Pond C, I think it's essential that for density reasons that units 1 through 24 be deleted from this proposal. I do think there is certainly some positive things. I like the fact that they are trying to open the pond areas to the public. I also am appreciative of the public arts commitment. Dave.
Sue pretty much covered my comments. I think cutting back on the number of units, and I'm not in favor of them cutting it into third, but cutting back on some of those units would have taken the building out of the floodplain, the building activity out of the floodplain, and would have solved some of the county's objections. And regarding Michelle's comment about the staff report, absolutely true. It's lovely to have the staff report before we actually take a vote on something, but we've been fighting that problem for years. And the fact is that the staff doesn't write their reports for us. The staff writes their reports for the planning commission and the supervisors, and their schedule is usually about 2 weeks before a planning commission meeting, the staff report gets published. And so it'd be nice to have them, and occasionally like this time we get them, but it's unrealistic for us to expect staff reports in this fashion.
And I disagree with Dave, and I think it's essential. And this is one reason that it's essential, because I learned a great deal about the pond quality and how it would be affected, the stormwater management, actually the storm outfall of units 1 through 24 is exactly on the spot of the wetlands.
David, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Yeah. Friendly question. I'm not trying to be a developer here, but I can't help kind of wear a developer hat a little bit. If we were to suggest that they essentially reduce the footprint of some of these buildings to give more area back to open space or to stormwater management, how would you or other people on the group feel about if we were to suggest some of these blocks of townhouses, turn into 2-over-2s, or they come up another floor? Because the thing that I'm worried about realistically is, people are advocating them cutting back a third of their units or something like that. I mean, at some point in time, the developer's just going to say, well, this doesn't pencil out anymore. I'm just going to, build your big office building here. See you later. We'll talk to you some other time. So I like the idea of at least having suggestions or them looking at this in other ways that might be, they can meet their pro forma, but it's also going to get us some of the things that we're looking for as a community.
I agree with that in the sense that when I looked at the map, when I say units 1 through 24, that's what staff recommended. I looked at it and I said, well, I can see how the front row, the units that were closest to the pond would be impacted. But what about the possibility of keeping the larger row behind it there and taking measures to ensure that the ponds and the wetlands would not be affected? So, maybe there's a compromise there. I would like to see that if that's possible, because I do understand that, there's a point at which, developers do need to have a certain number of units to make the proposal, viable for them.
And Matt, I'm with you on the statement that you made earlier that we definitely need more housing. So if there is some way for the builder, in this case, the developer in this case, to move that construction back in a way and maybe spread it out a little bit more east and west of west of the large building, maybe there's something that can be done there, 2/2s or whatever. But we do need to encourage more housing, not just in this development, but in others.
So a number of you have your hands up. I do want to go to some of our non-committee participants tonight because they've had their hands raised for quite a while. Lynn, would you like to make a comment?
Unmuted me. I unmuted myself and then you had unmuted me. Yeah, I have quite a few comments. I wanted to thank the committee members for your time in reviewing the comments from Reston Citizens Association that were submitted earlier today. And I did want to comment on some of the items that came up this evening, and I'll kind of work backwards. So talking about the idea of 2/2s, that was something that came up during one of the community meetings that McGuire Woods hosted. And they indicated that that was not something that they were interested in offering. So I don't know if that's something that that they may want to reconsider. But I think David Vanell, I sent you an email and I said your wife is awesome or amazing. But I totally agree with with the observation that the environmental quality corridor is one of the most important features on this parcel. And I was blown away by the staff report and the evaluation that was provided to Reston Planning and Zoning and the Planning Commission regarding their evaluation of this applicant's proposal. So I do think that they were recommending a reduction in units to the tune of, I think it was around 24. I'm not sure, but I think 24 reduction was recommended, and that it would respect that EQC. The other thing, and this is getting back to, was it Matt? Yes, Matt. So I understand you looking at this from the developer's perspective, and during the last community meeting, we did hear from the developer that, of course, their key interest here is to make money. And we understand that. You know, they are wanting to build and establish a presence in Reston. And Reston is not like any other community in Virginia, or probably many of our surrounding areas. Reston is unique, and the community, and this was in the staff report, the community is founded on the integration of nature with developed areas and the stewardship of its wetlands, streams, lakes, forests, and other natural areas. And if we are not holding developers to these principles, then we have lost Reston. So I think that this site, given its proximity to the stable neighborhoods, so this is probably one of the closest parcels to a stable neighborhood from the transit station areas and the TOD and non-TOD areas. We've got to be very careful. We are setting a precedent here. And I just think that it's extremely important that we not replicate the development that took place at Tall Oaks, that we've got to stay true to the architectural design elements that are unique and are part of the design principles that are set forth in the Reston Comprehensive Plan. Thank you.
If I could just quickly respond to that, I appreciate those comments. I know you don't know me, but I will tell you that I'm a project manager for an architecture firm here in Reston. I live at Lake Ann. I knew Bob Simon, and all these principles that you spoke about are extremely important to me and are certainly factored into any type of review that I've ever done on my 5 or so years on this board.
I appreciate that, Matt. Thank you. I just think that the alleyways at Tall Oaks are not anything that we want to replicate again, ever. It's not Reston. Sorry.
I'd like to come back to that point, Lynn, at some point, but Jan, let me go to Jan and then Tammy.
A couple, please forgive me, I have a brain injury, so I may speak a little stuttery, but the intentions are all there. On the, when we're talking about the step down and appropriate step down from TSA and so forth, I think it's more important to say Old Reston is incredibly unique in itself, even within Reston standard, for want of a better word. Reston is a combination of many environments. But Old Reston is unique within itself. This property is on this side of Sunset Hills. And right, wrong, or indifferent, I consider Sunset Hills to be part of that model of Old Reston, where it includes office buildings, it includes, but they're well handled. And I think that's important to note, that this proposed development does not fit in that kind of look and feel. Like Lynn was saying, the density as planned is just too tight to support the same kind of openness that Old Reston has. The townhouses that are right behind it are only 190 feet from the end units there to the units for the existing townhouses. Those townhouses have not alleys, but common areas between the units. So I'm concerned about that change to the look and feel of Old Reston. The density for the pond quality and the wildlife in the open space, the moment they start building, that wildlife is gone and it's not going to come back. I think we need to accept that as a reality. And I've heard a couple of comments, well, residential is better than office building. Just tonight, we heard about the Comstock, where they want to change from office to residential because office spaces aren't selling, or should I say, aren't leasing. So the only way they're going to recoup their losses so far is by selling residential units. The current building they have there is going from a single tenant to, it's going to have to go to multi-tenant. My concern there would be to ask you all to take a look at the Reston office zoning applications for converting down to residential. If that is true, that there are a number of them asking to rezone their office properties, then they're not going to build an office building here if we say no to residential. Again, that's my opinion, but I think the Comstock application that's coming itself sets it for me. And thank you.
Thank you, Jan. I see Tammy has her hand up.
Yes. When we first started talking about this program or this particular application, I suggested condensing the footprint, going higher, and doing a multifamily building. They wanted nothing to do with that. That would save trees. It would open up open space around them, so you'd lose fewer trees. In the base of the building, you could have the cluster community gathering spaces, and they maybe could get 90 units. Just classy 90 units, if that's what they're after. Again, the price points weren't in the $5,000 and $6,000 range. They were high. So I understand what Matt's saying is that, he thinks we need housing. I don't think we need the wrong kind of housing. I don't think we ruin an environment because we quote need housing and there's a slathering, need that supersedes a biophilic community. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy.
Rob, this is Jose with the Hunter Mill office. Michelle Silver is an attendee that wanted to make a comment. If that's okay.
Okay, sure.
Try to unmute her. Michelle?
Hi, thank you, Jose.
Mhm.
Good evening, everyone. I live in the North Shore cluster, for those of you who may not know, and I appreciate the Fairfax County staff report and the letter from the Reston Association. I think they summed up things very nicely. One of our biggest concerns at the North Shore cluster is keeping the proffers from 1993 about the trees and the fence that buffer our property to the Fannie Mae building. And I will tell you, in terms of the environment, that one of the community calls we had with Wheelock and their lawyers at McGuire Woods, when we were talking about that pathway from North Shore to Plaza America, and they have been adamant to date about if there's a future tenant that needs to have security to that building, that they would need to build a different sidewalk. And in one of the conversations we had, Steve Caniglio threatened to cut down all the trees and remove the fence between our property. That was his solution. So that did not go over well with our community. And I'm hoping that they take out their current proffer 20, which has that as a hidden clause about tearing down the fence. And the last thing I'll say is about setting the precedents. I walk there regularly. At least once a week, I walk those trails. And they are not taking care of it. I know that for a fact because I go over there with trash bags and pick up trash around the ponds. But it's also setting a precedent of what they build there because I know they also own Hidden Creek. And I think they see a big dollar mark on Hidden Creek right now. And I know they've been pushing to try to build there. So to me, that is a concern to the North Shore community about the fact that if, they continue to build a lot of density here, what's going to happen to Hidden Creek. So thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
And Michelle, and thank you for sending us a lot of information during this whole process. It's very, very helpful.
Thank you for reading it.
And especially the video of one of your meetings, that the YouTube video that was informative as well. Hey, I'm just going to make a comment or two here. I want to go on record as I'm one that usually has been knowing that the demands of getting a staff report in time for us to make a decision. I'm usually one that's very quick to point out that that's just highly unlikely for us to get those in time with the demands that the county has in getting the staff report out prior to the Planning Commission. But I will say in this particular case, that staff report was very helpful to see some of the very specifics that I think this committee touched around some of the issues that were in the staff report, but then having the backup there was quite helpful to just understand some of the history and some of the some of the reasoning that certainly drew some of the staff concerns. I do believe there are answers to some of those concerns that we might hear from the applicant in the future, but we'll wait and see how that comes about. I'm searching for hands in the chat. Let's see.
Hey, Rob, my hand's a new one.
Oh, okay. Michelle, please go ahead.
Yeah, there's one thing we didn't talk about, and again, this is more bigger picture, is RA membership. And I think that we have a problem that too often we hear applicants say, oh, we're having conversations. And that's not a sufficient answer, especially on townhome projects where there are not enough amenities on site to really incorporate, to just RA membership, especially on certain projects, just has to be, I think we have to get more from applicants than simply we're having conversations. That's not sufficient. And I don't know how we can do that, but I mean, I think there are a number of folks on this committee that also feel that RA membership is quite important too. The other thing I'll just say, just because we talked about adding more housing and somehow in relation to affordability, I have to say, if they came to us with a true, affordable housing proposal, that would be something very different. But instead, as Tammy pointed out, these are $1 million townhomes. I mean, I'm sorry, but I have a very hard time seeing how adding $1 million townhomes is at all going to help with affordability. And I just think that argument doesn't hold weight. So thank you.
So Michelle, I'm always been one to jump on that RA bandwagon. That is a pet peeve of mine, and that always has been. For those who might not know, we're in this pickle for some of the land around Reston. When they lifted some of the covenants on some of the land in Reston, this site actually might be a little bit of an outlier because I think it has a different history to it. But I do believe that Fairfax County said legally they cannot require an applicant of a zoning application to be forced into a situation where they have to pay into a homeowners association. And so it is the best we can do is to strongly advocate for that. And I totally agree. We're getting a lot of lip service, and sometimes that lip service turns to nothing. And And I do think, both at the planning commission, at the board level, that needs to also be, emphasized very strongly. But I think there's a legality to it that we all have to be mindful of, that it does stop short of making it an absolute legal requirement for somebody to do that.
Oh,
I'm
absolutely, Rob. And
raising my hand.
I'm not suggesting that we are requiring it. I don't know that we can. However, I find it to be, to say we're having conversations is not helpful. Either they're going to join or they're not. This is not, they're just kicking this down the road, pretending like it's a possibility. We should have enough respect here that we can know if they're going to join or not.
Yeah, or maybe better said, have that dialogue well before they're ready to come in to us, so that they can say, we've already sat down, we've already had the dialogue, here's the result.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think Dick Kennedy's trying to raise his hand.
Thank you. The one thing I was interested in, well, I had a bunch of other issues, but there's so much talk. I wanted to make a suggestion that maybe what we need is multifamily housing there, properly done. We could possibly have enough additional units working in to it that would maybe get the developer more money on their investment. I'm not sure how that would work out, and there are probably other issues. The other thing is, I don't think on the existing issue that they should be allowed to go beyond what they keep showing us in their diagrams, 84 units. If they keep the same type of housing to 90 plus, I think that's just off the charts for that kind of housing there. And the other thing is, I hope that we're seeing that there won't be any outside limits to getting into the property. If the people in the commercial building want security, there's ways to build the security around their building, which would be far preferable. And I think that is, if anything, one of the biggest thing that's against having those kind of gate limits against the principles of Reston. I've got some other things too, but I'm going to keep those for later. Thanks.
So Dick, you raise a very good point, and one I should probably mention. I brought that up to the applicant about the gate and the fact that they're blocking off access for the roadway, and I know that has been on the plan since the first time they came before us. I'm just not sure a lot of us focused on that as much and thought about the ramifications of, what that does to the grid of streets in Reston and so on. One of the defenses that they had for that was, apparently there's an underground garage that does go underneath the roadway that circles around the existing building today, and that they're concerned that a user would have a lot of security concerns because of that underground garage being underneath the roadway. That's just the way it is today. And I kind of said to the applicant, you're trying to bring in a mixed use development, but then you're kind of segregating off the one use to the other use. And it's hard to have it both ways. But, if those are some fundamental type issues that we as a group might have, those are certainly, ones we want to voice strongly if that's a consensus of, of things. The other comment I want to go back to is, we do have to be careful about taking some hearsay in the community about how costly or how these units might be, what their market rate might be, because I'm not sure that some of that's factual. If you go over to the EYA townhomes that are being built by Reston Station, I mean, those have been advertised in the paper and in publication for around, the 800,000 mark. But they're right across the street from the metro station. I don't know what these townhomes and these units would go for, but they're certainly much further away from the metro. And and then there's different unit sizes, and so, and then they all come with different amenity packages, and so there, you know, we got to be careful about you know, spreading information that I'm not sure any of us know what those unit values are going to be. I'm not even sure the developer knows, quite frankly.
Well, they haven't even been designed yet. I mean, they're just squares on the ground.
Right, right.
Did that not come from a community meeting though, where they said that?
Yeah, I've never heard it, Michelle, in anything I've heard.
In the first community meeting that I went to, sorry, this is Jan DeLucian, they did put an initial price point of around 800.
Okay, thank you, Jan.
Rob, it's Jose. Oh, I saw a hand that went up but went down. Kevin Danaher, but not sure if he wanted to make a comment.
Jan covered it.
Oh, okay.
That was an accurate statement. They said specifically $800,000 in one of the meetings. I remember that.
Yeah, sorry, I haven't been looking at the entire attendee list. I have a truncated list here, so.
Yeah, and additionally, Lynn has a hand, but also Michelle Silver also had a follow-up. Michelle?
Yes, hi. In the last community meeting we had on February 9th, I asked Steve Caniglio what the price point was. And this is the one that's recorded on YouTube. And he said 1 to 1.2 million. And I asked that question because when I watched the RA board meeting, I think from the previous week, there was a quotation of 800,000. So that's where the 1 to 1.2 million is. Steve Caniglio, mispronouncing his name, that's what he said.
Thank you, Michelle. I knew it came, I thought it came directly from them.
Thanks, sorry.
Lynn, did you have something else to add?
Yes, I did. I just wanted to point the Reston Planning and Zoning Committee members to the staff report where there are some errors in calculations. So I wanted to get back to some of the things that Matt was talking about in terms of density and how McGuire Woods and Wheelock are using different variables to calculate their density. So I would encourage you to please, I know the devil is in the details, but please go to the staff report and read those inconsistencies. I've tried to bring that into the email that came from the Reston Citizens Association to highlight that. And also, I think that there are several inconsistencies that need to be brought to light. Just so that you all are working from the facts and not what you're being told by Wheelock or their counsel. Staff really did an awesome job on this, and I really have to commend them for the tremendous job that they've done. And, you know, again, I have expressed my admiration for the work that you all do, and hope that you realize how important this role that you have undertaken is to the good of Reston. So thank you.
And Rob, I think Jan had a new hand.
Okay, Jan?
Thank you. On the RA membership piece, my understanding, and I recognize that this is partially hearsay, but falling into Tammy's or Michelle's comment about talking to them not being the same thing as reaching an agreement, I believe one of the conditions they referenced in the second community meeting was of requesting RA to take over the ownership management of the EQC and all. That would involve a significant increase in RA membership dues. in order to add that to their current budget. So I'm not entirely sure. I'm not saying it's not in good faith. I'm saying the probabilities are questionable. My other,
We have Larry
Please.
on the line right now with RA who would be able to help with that.
oh, great, thank you. Larry, I'll yield to you as long as I get back to security issues.
Sure. Yeah, Larry Butler here. Yeah, we had some early discussions with Wheelock about that. And what they said, they were going to have an umbrella association combined of the townhouses and the commercial property, and they would take care of the ponds. And quite frankly, we're fine with that. You know, the key for Reston Association is that they're publicly accessible and well maintained.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
On the security issues, I question their statement about tenants having an issue with the underground parking. There are a number of buildings in DC that have secure SCIF facilities and entirely secure buildings that are over public parking garages. So I question their position on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan.
Rob, I don't see any additional hands unless Lynn had a follow-up. Oh, it went down.
That went down too.
Oh, no, it came back up.
Yep. Thank you, Jose. I took it down because I knew you were thinking I didn't have another question, but I do have another point. So beside the density calculation that staff has brought to the attention of those who are reviewing their staff report, the other one, and I know David Vanella is going to appreciate this, is about affordable housing and how they are calculating their contribution to that base. So please have a look at that. And that's all I've got. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you, Lynn. Let me just mention a thing about the density and how it was calculated. This is something I just learned today. So there are situations where developers have dedicated land for rights of way, so for roadway, and some of that dedication goes to the public, and they're able to take density credit for some of those rights of way in the future. My understanding is the new zoning ordinance that came out has some new verbiage in there that makes that you know, a little harder to do when you do an amendment like we're faced with today. And then in the staff report, they also talked about an internal policy that the county's been applying for some time to limit the amount of credit that density can be taken. Some of that is being legally debated. I'll just say that. On this application, I don't know the history, so I'm saying this as a more of a generalization that some of this is a little bit new to the new ordinance in Fairfax County, and then others is left to it becomes a timing thing of when the dedication occurred, was there proper notation to how the density was used and how the proffer language was specifically read. So it gets quite complicated. It's just something that this applicant and the county are going to have to figure out and present it in the right way. Well, listen, we don't need to stretch this out tonight. I thought it was just a good idea for some of us to get some of the things out of our heads and out into the air to vent maybe a little bit. You know, we're certainly not trying to make any decisions tonight, and anxious to see how the applicant reacts to everything that they're seeing, hearing, and how they will respond and I can certainly, if everybody's okay, I could certainly pass along some of the information that was discussed tonight. I mean, it's maybe already summarized in many of the correspondence that's been sent out, but I could kind of emphasize what was emphasized tonight, so the applicant really understands, some of the, the issues at hand. So if you don't mind, I'd like to transition real quick over to Jose. We're gonna, we do need to talk in our future about how to get an update here at the Planning and Zoning on the Reston Master Plan and the task force, and where things stand, where how that schedule looks like, and then what role does Planning and Zoning end up wanting to play in that as that marches its way toward ultimate approval at the Board of Supervisors.
Hey, Rob, I'm so sorry to ask this, but I think you had just said that you were going to take what we said tonight and give it back to the applicant. But to be very clear, I mean, I think they need to come back to us. And, staff recommended denying approval of this application. And so I think that we need to see something drastically different. And they need to fully address the issues that staff raised. And I don't want this conversation to be indicative of where everyone is on this, and to that's just not, that wasn't at least what I thought the intention was of this evening.
No, and that's fine, Michelle. I was just suggesting to re-emphasize the points that have already been made in the staff report and how they were emphasized again tonight's discussion, not to speak for anybody or not to say that the committee came to any consensus on any of the issues, but is really meant to almost suggest that, the committee took those staff report denial points very seriously, and along with the other things that are coming out of RA and Reston Citizens Association and the neighboring community very seriously. And that's the only message that I think that the applicant needs to hear, that they need to be looking at all of this as a whole.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Jose.
Thank you, Rob. So I can be quick. So I was working with Rob to see when would be the best time for members of the task force. Some of them are on tonight as attendee. Also, some of the P&Z members could come to the P&Z and provide at least some as an initial outreach to the Planning and Zoning Committee on the review of the Reston Comprehensive Plan. And as some of the task force members know, meeting 45 ended February 7th. So good amount of discussion and working really hard to schedule meetings with some of these groups and organizations, and didn't want to forget about the Reston Planning and Zoning. So we do have that scheduled for the March P&Z meeting, Rob, if I'm not mistaken. And there are probably some of the folks on the P&Z that are familiar with the Reston Plan study page. So I'm just going to quickly just share the website. And what I'll do is through Rob, I'll send the link to the page, but also the where the interim task force recommendations are. So if I can do this right. So everyone, this is the Reston Comprehensive Plan study page on the county website. Has some general information about the process, the board matter that Supervisor Alcorn did at the beginning of January 2020. And we are, like I said, we are doing some initial outreach. So we do have, we are actually going to Reston Association this Wednesday night, also presenting to Reston Citizens Association, a couple other groups, but we are coming to the P&Z on March 21st. And we do have an archive of all the previous meetings. We recently went out to the Reston Chamber last Thursday, and then, like I said, we ended up meeting 45 on February 7th. And then to get to the task force interim recommendations, we actually created a tab with county staff on the page, which you just click this link, and then it kind of takes you to a compiled. I guess it was compiled document of all the different topic areas from the introduction, planning principles, land use, transportation, parks, rec and open space, housing, public facilities, equity, environmental stewardship, heritage, resources, community health, economic development, and public art. So it's 173 pages, but what I'll do is after the meeting, I'll share this with Rob. If there are certain areas that the P&Z wants to talk about when we come next month. And there are some task force members on the call, Rob. They may be able to provide some additional information as well.
Yeah, so as I understand, I think this might still be to be determined, but I think Supervisor Alcorn, I think at some point is hoping for maybe an endorsement of the recommendations by our committee. I don't know if that's official or been officially asked, but Jose, I think that was my understanding, that they were just looking for at least some feedback from the community.
At this point in time, this initial outreach is just to get feedback for the task force as they, finalize their recommendations when they reconvene. We could definitely talk about, if the P&Z would like to provide a recommendation. I think that would, just like with some of these zoning applications, maybe that's something that the planning and zoning has done prior. We can definitely talk about that, but I think I see that as an opportunity, maybe not at the March meeting, but at a further meeting as we're gearing up towards public hearings. I think March would be way too soon. David and Michelle had hands, I think.
Jose and Rob, this is David. It seems to me that maybe we ought to carve out, the P&Z ought to carve out another date for this discussion, because this is going to comprise a whole meeting, I'm sure, by the time everybody in the P&Z has comments to make, and that leaves basically no time for Fannie Mae to come back. So maybe we ought to try to meet before the 21st to discuss the task force comments or task force documents.
Or maybe in April. We already have 3 cases of regular applications for March.
Well, no, Tammy, we only have one in March right now. The other ones, there was one in April and the other one's to be determined.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
So, that we had tentatively scheduled the task force meeting for the March meeting because we had no other applicants at that point. Now that the Fannie Mae, and I question whether Fannie Mae can even make March, quite frankly. So we might need to see how that plays out in the next week or so. But David, I agree. We can't do both on the same night. But the initial task force, I felt that was just trying to give us, number one, a sense of where the task force is today, where things, just give us a little bit more of a synopsis of where we weren't going to go over anything in real tremendous detail. We need to give people time to understand where things are, what's still left to be done, how can you access it, and give some people some time to look and read it if they so choose. And the thought was the March meeting was going to be that first forum to just start opening the dialogue, not to get an in-depth discussion, but or we could pivot and have more of a, get some information out there ahead of time and then have a dedicated meeting, and maybe on an off night that is just purely dedicated to that, where we get into some, maybe some content.
This is Dick Kennedy. My only comment is that this could be a very complicated issue. As you know, you were in the 5-year plan, and these folks that are working on Mr. Alcorn's plan have been working meeting after meeting for at least a year or two. But one of the key issues maybe is to have the supervisor's office point out some critical issues that he would like another opinion on. But I don't know if the that would even fit into what he wants. So I should stop talking about that, except to say it's going to be tricky and complicated and has a potential for being very long, which I don't think we can afford. Okay, enough said.
Well, no, Richard, you bring up a good point. I mean, we already have several of our members on our committee on the task force, you know, I'm sure giving really good input. So I know for me personally, I'd love to read a lot of the text where it relates to things that I'm more knowledgeable about. And I'd love to, give an opinion as just as a professional on some of the content. But yeah, we'll have to think about just what input we think we can provide as a committee versus all just, taking time to read it ourselves and figure out if we have any specific input that, that goes to our different respective areas of expertise, for example.
So we also have the lofts on March, right? So possibly Fannie Mae, the lofts, and then a presentation. Jose, when you were with the chamber, it was just an hour, right? The presentation?
It was an hour meeting, yeah.
Okay. And so if you were thinking of doing something similar, was that the same thing, just the presentation and questions?
I would assume so with having, there's, like I said, that I think the P&Z is represented in the task force, but any other task force members that wanted to join us that evening, to answer any comments or questions. But I think that was just the general format. We wanted to come to the supervisor's office, facilitate that meeting and come to the P&Z. So that was the intent. And we understand that if it's a lengthy document and it's probably, if we needed, come in initially in March and maybe look at, through even as we do the broader engagement over the summer months, coming, if there's the opportunity to come back to the P&Z to maybe have more of a deep dive or have any particular areas, we could do that as well.
So it seems that if Fannie Mae does not come back in March, although they've indicated that they intend to, you could do the lofts and then this presentation if it were similar to what was before the chamber in that kind of format and not an in-depth discussion of every section.
Yeah. And then Rob, I forgive me, I didn't bring it up. I know the one thing that was the supervisor did mention to the task force is he did indicate that he would like to, I think we're looking at public hearings to the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors in the fall. So part of that also means after we do some of this initial outreach is reconvening with the task force sometime, and we're looking at task force dates in April. So we'll try to make sure that we respect when the P&Z needs to meet, kind of like we did with prior meetings.
I mean, we could even have the presentation in March and then have our real discussion either in a special meeting or the following meeting.
Yeah, I think what's throwing a wrench into this is the notion that Fannie Mae needs to come back to us and whether or not they're coming back in March or not. That was just brand new today. So we're still trying to react to that, is to figure out how that works with any of the schedule that we were planning on other items. It could be that Fannie Mae has to be a special meeting. I mean, that if and when that they're ready, I'll just, let's have to work with them to figure out where they are.
Just a thought about how long it might take, even for a brief discussion. The Reston Chamber took an hour, maybe a little bit more than an hour, and there weren't all that many comments, and they all were kind of in one direction. I would submit that having this brief run through of the task force's work in front of the P&Z is going to generate a lot more comments in a lot more areas. So I'm not sure that we can count on that meeting on the 21st being just an hour.
Got it.
And Rob, I think the only other thing is where if we do come in March, where on the agenda you want us to come, we can come in. If Fannie Mae comes in, we can go last. That's supervisor defers to the P and Z, but we could talk about that as well.
All right, so we got some scheduling to do. That's
Yeah.
for sure. When you really think of it, tomorrow is March 1st. If we're 20 to 21 days away from that March date, to me, the Fannie Mae applicant has a lot to do between now and then to get their application in order. That's my editorial. But. All right. I think we should call it a night. I think that was really good discussion, really good dialogue. I think a lot of the points that we're making tonight kind of also are bigger picture items for the whole area for us to kind of take under advisement for other applications in the future.
Right, good. Thank you, Rob.
Well,
Thanks,
appreciate everybody's time and those from the public as well.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
So moved.
I want to thank you all for everything that you do. Thank you.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you for that.
Good night,
everybody.
Night.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Jose.